Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Parallel Magic, the science fiction and fantasy book show. In this podcast, I, Kate M. Colby, and my fellow author and friend Jonas Lee will be discussing a sci-fi or fantasy book over a drink. How's it hanging, Jonas?
It is going excellent on this Saturday. How are you?
Doing well, no complaints.
Perfect. Well, since this is a semi-drinking, semi-book podcast, what I have in my hands today, it's called a Grim Reaper. Yes, I actually looked for it just because it's kind of tied into the theme of the book. But it is 1 part Kahlua, 1 part rum, and a splash of grenadine. Kind of tastes like if Cherry Coke punched you in the face.
Ooh,
That's
that
kind of what
sounds
it's
good.
like. Yeah. What are you drinking today?
Well, I'm drinking, I guess, half of a Grim Reaper because I have Bundaberg rum. So Bundaberg is an Australian rum company, and you can't, as far as I know, get it in the U.S., so I can only have a little splash, or my husband will be very irritated if I drink it all without him. So I'm pacing myself today.
Just one sip at a time.
Yes.
Well, perfect. Well, just to give a little background to our first listeners out there, like Kate said, my name is Jonas Lee. I'm an independent author. I have a trilogy out there right now that's in the sci-fi time travel subgenre, and working on new books and everything like that. And as far as Kate goes, I'll let Kate explain what she's into.
Yeah, so I'm working on my first series right now called Deserterra. The first 3 books are published, with 2 more to come, hopefully by the end of this year. And it is a steampunk-inspired science fantasy series. So lots of genre blending and funky stuff going on in there.
All the things mixed in with each other. It's great. I'm on your last one, so I can attest that they are a great series of books.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And in speaking of a great book, what we have for us on the plate today is a book by Neal Shusterman. I think I'm saying that right. Or is it Shusterman? Either way.
Yeah, either way.
Somebody's going to know what that is. But it's his first in a series, and it's called Scythe. And I'll read a brief synopsis before we get into our own detailed analysis of what we thought. So from his Goodreads page, it says, "A world with no hunger, no disease, no war, no misery. Humanity has conquered all those things and has even conquered death. Now scythes are the only ones who can end life, and they are commanded to do so in order to keep this size of the population under control. Citra and Rowan are chosen to apprentice to a scythe, a role that neither wants. These teens must master the art of taking life, knowing that the consequence of failure could mean losing their own." So that is a brief nutshell of what the book is about. Kate, I'll let you go first as far as what you thought of the general writing and everything.
All right. Well, to be entirely honest, Scythe kind of gave me a little bit of an existential crisis. Basically, because this is a world where humans are immortal, death, in a way, isn't a threat to them. But at the same time, a scythe could come in and kill you at any point for any reason. So even though death is not guaranteed, it's still a possibility. And it really got me thinking about, our own mortality and how, on one hand, that precious time makes life all the more beautiful and important. But at the same time, it's like, oh, well, death is definitely a certainty for us. So that's bleak. But as far as the writing goes, I really enjoyed it. I think Shusterman really has a way of just every now and then turning a really elegant phrase. And the pacing overall was really quick. I mean, I started this book on an airplane, which is, always great when you're like reading about death to be on an airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it kept me entertained for the entire 4-hour flight. Like, it just made the flight go really quickly, and I was engaged, and I actually almost didn't want the flight to end so that I could keep reading. There were a few moments in the writing that I didn't really care for. He had this knack of putting in an ominous expression at the end of a scene, like something along the lines of, and Citra would soon learn how important that would be. And I was kind of like, okay, don't tell me it's going to be important. Like, let me figure that out for myself when we get to that point. But overall, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it was definitely more about the concept for me. But I did really like it, and I really want more of that world. You know, he got somewhat into the science of it, but I wanted to know even more. And as a person who doesn't always like the sciencey technical aspects of things, that was a really big deal for me. So big
Getting
thumbs
into
up.
that science part.
Yes. What did you think?
I agree. There are some of those moments in there where you kind of get a hint of being told what to expect to think. Mm-hmm. So I remember that part. And for you, I was going to ask actually, how did you read this book? Was it ebook, paperback, hardback, audiobook?
I read it on my Kindle.
Okay, so you had a Kindle copy. I myself, I actually picked up the hardback. It was like on a discount when I was at a bookstore, and just by the cover of it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to read that someday. But when I was going through it, I'm a big audiobook person, so I actually liked to splice between these. So I would read at home on the hardback, and then I would actually pick up the audiobook when I'm on my way to work or as I'm doing some menial tasks at work, that kind of thing. So I kind of got two different sides to it. The narrator that I was listening to did a great job. He enunciated everything perfectly, didn't make it too much of like a weird game show voice, which some audiobooks tend to do.
Yes.
But there was great writing, and like you said, there's moments in there where I was actually going back to the hard book just so I can actually highlight some of those passages, because they were a beautiful turn of phrase and something that made you sit back and kind of think about how that's constructed. So throughout the entire thing, I would say this is actually one of my more favorited books of the year, just because of the concept. Not so much the writing. I mean, the writing was good. There wasn't anything in it that made me go, that's stupid. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's certain other authors that just kind of appeal to me a little bit more, and their use of words and phrases and things like that capture me more than the story does. This one, the story captured me a lot more than the words do, which isn't trying to put his words down, but it was the fact that story was just something so new and unique concept, and something that, I mean, I have thought about as a sci-fi nerd, and like, what if people could live forever, and what if this was that, and what would happen? And like you said, existential crisis is just kind of getting thrown at you like darts every now and then. So, but yeah, all in all, I loved the writing. I loved how it was put together. I love that it left you with an ending that could make you stop right there if you really wanted to, but also can look forward to the next one that's coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the way he did the ending as well.
Yeah, I like series where they can actually give you a stop point where you can go, now if you want more, there's going to be more, but if you don't feel bad. And if you pick up the next book, you won't feel bad that you didn't necessarily pick up the first book. That's the kind of series that I like too.
Yeah, it's nice when authors give you an out, but also new entry points if the series is exceptionally long. Which this series is not long yet, but by the time this podcast comes out, the second book, Thunderhead, will be out.
Right. So, just based off of that alone, before we get into more of the details of personal scenes and what's going on, so we don't necessarily spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it yet and wants to and doesn't want our opinions or feedback yet, what would you rate this? And for us and for listeners out there, we're going to be doing a shot system instead of a star system. So what do you think? We're going to do 5 shots or 10 shots? That's the part I want to know.
Let's do 10, and then we have a little more nuance if we need it later on.
Yeah, so we can basically leave it from warm and tingly to flat on my back, blackout drunk. So I'm going to let you be the first one to rate this because, well, I said it. So I gotta let you rate it first.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I will give it 8 out of 10 shot glasses. So I don't know where that would be on our tipsy scale. I guess it's having a pretty good time and probably should call an Uber home.
Probably.
Um,
Definitely
yeah.
don't drive on 8 shots, people.
Yeah. So I did. I really love the concept. I really love some of the bigger themes it touched on about life, death, religion, what we should do with our time on Earth. Um, but like you said, the writing, while it was, perfectly good, it didn't blow me away in the way that some books do. And as I'll talk about when we get to the spoiler section, there were some questions that I had that I don't think were adequately answered, which held me
Mm.
back from those final 2 shot glasses.
Yeah. Um, well, for me personally, I'm right around there with you. I would actually probably give this one closer to 9 shots. I don't know if we can do a half shot, so I'm just going to say that we're going to do full shots or no shots at all.
I think that's smart.
Yeah. So I'm going to give it 9. I'm really going on a limb with it. I think with this being the first book that we're podcasting about, but like I said, it was one of my favorite reads of the year. It had so many different concepts in it and things that make me think. Same thing goes for movies too. If there's a movie that is good enough to make me think about so many different life points that I don't normally think about in a day, and makes me concentrate and focus and almost kind of obsess over it, then there's something really great about that story. So for this one, that's where I leave it. And like I said, I'll probably take that 1 shot off from being a blackout drunk, just because his writing, there's nothing wrong with it. There's points in there where there's quotable things and beautiful writing, but it is just like it's writing there to make the story go along. It's just like a means to an end. It's like having utensils when you're eating pizza. That's what I equate it to. So,
Fair enough.
yeah. Well, now at this point, just so everybody knows, this is the point where spoilers will start to happen. We are going to start talking about more of the in-depth parts of the book. So if you don't like it, give us a pause, come back to us later after you've read it, or if you just want to see what it's all about and see if it's actually worth your time, stick around, and here we go. So, one of the main things I loved about it was the use of sci-fi in it by those little nanites. Was that what they were using?
Yes,
Is that what they
that's
called
what they
them?
are using.
So people, they don't die because these little tiny nanites in their body can repair them in pretty much no time or sustain them until a medical droid gets there. And everything's controlled by the Thunderhead, which is something that is above the cloud. I think I kind of whisked over it, but got the concept of it. So if I went back, that would be the only thing I'd kind of go into a little bit more depth, because the Thunderhead evolved from the cloud. Is that right?
Yeah. It's basically like a benevolent Skynet. It's it's the internet grown into artificial intelligence that can basically handle all forms of human life. So there's no government anymore because the Thunderhead doles out punishments where need be, and it controls everything: traffic systems, all aspects of life, security systems. If there's a fire, it dispatches fire drones immediately to take care of it so that no one dies. It's really quite a magnificent thing. And because we have this classic example of Skynet from the Terminator being this evil AI computer system, I thought it was really beautiful and optimistic to have a benevolent one.
Yeah, that was the one thing I think that kind of turned it over for me too, because anytime you think of artificial intelligence, the first thought you have is like Skynet from Terminator or the Bishop androids from Alien, and you just go, these things are going to kill us. They want to wipe us out. And then having this one where it actually looks past that and go, no, you're fine. We'll just make sure you live and everything will be good. Keep living. Like, oh, well, shit, thanks.
On the subject of the nanites, though, I don't know if it's just me, but I've come across a lot of books and movies recently that use nanites. And so for me it's almost starting to become a cliche or like a catch-all solution for
Mm.
sci-fi. So maybe I don't understand the technology enough. Maybe if nanites did come into existence, they really would be this fantastic. But I mean, they seem to kind of be all over right now, and so I'm getting a little desensitized to their magic, I think.
Yeah, I mean that is a thing. Unfortunately, when you come through it and you think about it originally, and it's a brand new thing, I thought it was like, oh, awesome, because all these little machines are just going to repair everything in your body, and where your blood just kind of does what it needs to do, and this will do what it has to do. And now everybody's kind of on that same train. You're like, oh, that favorite song that I once had, now everybody loves it. Now I hate it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part, it is kind of a catch-all, but it is kind of a. I think of it more as when science fiction someday might become science reality.
Yeah.
Thinking back to things like Star Trek when they had those communicators, and now everybody has cell phones, and those kind of things where you kind of look back and go, once upon a time, people thought this was never going to happen. So I look at it both ways. I kind of have the optimistic and pessimistic point of view, but
Yeah,
I see where you're coming from.
for sure.
One thing that I liked, or not really liked, but that I thought was interesting is that what do they call them, splatters or splats?
Oh, yeah, the people who willingly jumped off buildings and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like wanted to die and in some horrific way just because they knew that they were going to come back to life. So it's like a thrill seeker, but the only way that they know how anymore.
Yeah, I could definitely see certain people gravitating towards that because it would be the ultimate adrenaline rush. Because, like, why do we love roller coasters? Because they put us close to death, but, we don't actually get there. So,
Yeah.
in a world where you actually can get there and come back, why not jump off a building and get to fly
Oh,
for a
yeah.
couple seconds?
Yeah, feel the rush on the way down. You're going to know you're going to wake up. So, yeah, that part. I mean, as gruesome as it was in some ways, I just kind of went, well, think about everything else, and I think that's when it started kind of making a connection as far as mortality goes. If you and I think about this, if we ever cross over into the fantasy vampire genre, that's one of those things that also makes you think, like, if you're going to live pretty much forever, what do you have to look forward to anymore? Because I think our mortality tends to give us humanity, and with that we appreciate more. And then you come across this society where people don't have to worry about death, disease, hunger, starvation, pain. I mean, pain is pretty much obsolete too, because those nanites, they just flood your veins with morphine or whatever pain relieving drug that there is, and boom, you're fixed. But the only thing that they fear is the size, and those are the ones that actually take life away permanently. And I don't know, thinking about that, it makes you ask yourself the question, would you want to live forever? Because at that point they have those, one of the things I caught on to was the museums, what do they call it, the
Oh, the
post-mortal?
post-mortal and pre-mortal.
Post-mortal. Yeah, premortal. That's what it was. But, and how the artwork was so much different in the pre-mortal versus post-mortal.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have that creativity, that pain, that suffering that gets channeled into creativity and artistry and things like that. And that was one of the things I've always tried to bring up with people, is that, do you think that pain actually makes creatives more creative?
Yeah, that's a tough question. On one hand, I think pain as well as great joy, both ends of the spectrum, can really increase your creative thinking and inspire you. But when I was in college, I was in a poetry workshop, and one of my classmates brought in a poem about visiting an aquarium, and it was just about fish and how pretty fish are. And her whole point was that you don't need pain to write poetry.
Was it good poetry?
It was good poetry. She was a very
Okay.
good poet. But I don't know. I think I kind of disagree with her. I think you need some kind of raw emotion, whether it's negative or positive. And I think you really see that played out in this novel. Because because I also really liked one of the Scythes, Scythe Curie,
Mm.
her philosophy, how she chooses who to kill, is based on whether or not they look stagnant, whether or not after living for a couple hundred or even 1,000 years, these people just look world weary and like they're done.
That they're
And
wanting to end.
yeah, and so I think that really answers your question. Like for some people, they probably would be happy to live forever and learn new languages and new skills and have relationships. But I think there is something about humanity where we're just not built for forever. And I really liked that they addressed that with her kills.
Yeah, I think that was a good touch that they had because they have different methodologies for different sides, and um, hers I think definitely resonated that same principle as well. I can't remember Scythe Faraday's. He was just kind of he went off more statistics, more this
Yep.
would have happened, and I
Yes.
chose you.
Hmm.
So I mean, there you see that scientific versus humanitarian aspect between the two of them, and I think it was a great blend because you both saw the humanity in both of their actions, but I mean for different reasons.
Well, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you had Scythe Goddard and his crew. And basically, their method is they just go to a crowded place, like a plane, which I was on.
Mm-hmm. Did you read during that point?
I did. I read. So basically, they go on the plane to glean, is what they call killing.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kill all the passengers.
Yeah.
Because, in the mortal age, technology used to fail, planes crashed, and everyone died.
Mm-hmm.
So they did that at a mall as well, which kind of simulated like a mass shooting. And on one hand, I think your initial reaction is to think, oh my God, that's so brutal. The fact that they would just go in and massacre people. But at the same time, they did have a passion about it. And like in a very morbid way, they really thought they were doing humanity a service by, taking out these people and controlling the population, but doing it in a way where they take pride in their position as opposed to self-loathing over what they have to do. And I think that makes a very interesting statement about human nature because, we are predatory in a way. We're the top of the food chain. And, that doesn't mean that we should act immorally, but maybe there is something to be said for taking pride in our place in the world.
Yeah, I was conflicted in a bunch of different areas when they were going through that and kind of explaining their own rationale of like I'm going to give you a glorious death. I'm not going to just let you eke out into a peaceful, slumber of poison. I'm going to rip into you. I'm going to burn you. Making it worthwhile saying that this is your last act on earth and this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to make it worth everybody's while who hears about it. So in that essence, I'm kind of going, great, but I'd hate to be that person.
Right.
I hate
Yeah.
to be the one that's like, oh, sweet, and it's me today. Great. But I mean, yeah, it kind of makes you wonder yourself, like how, if you were in that book, which way would you want to go? Like which would you actually prefer? Would you like to go out just like a puff of wind, or would you like to be this grand finale of like 40 people's demise all of a sudden? And I don't know. I don't.
Yeah,
Me personally, I'm like, a painless one sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think when it came down to it, I would really want to be gleaned by Scythe Faraday, where he like sits you down and he's like, look, there is a logic behind this. It sucks for you, but
Mm-hmm.
at least you get a reason. And he's very compassionate. He let his targets write letters to their family, which I thought was
Yeah.
really nice. Because I think the thing about Scythe Goddard's method is it would be kind of nice to not be dying by yourself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want that fear, that like the
Yeah.
fact that the last thing you're feeling is fear, like not just like the fear of death, but like the fear of like brutal, painful death.
Yeah,
So,
like
I don't know.
elongated death. I don't want that.
I'm one of those boring people who just wants to die in my sleep when I'm 102.
Yeah, I want to be that one that gets touched and all of a sudden just falls over dead. Whatever that method was that they were starting to employ.
Mhm.
But yeah, And then you get to that point where Goddard and his group, you realize why you don't like him. It's because they enjoy it so much. And it doesn't seem like it's the enjoyment of doing their job. It's their enjoyment of actually killing people. And then you kind of cross that line into, oh, okay, now some of these people are sociopaths. I think Volta was the one that was actually more compassionate. He was the one that killed himself at the end because he just did something so horrible and he couldn't live with it.
Yes.
And that made me go, I feel for you, buddy. Like,
Well,
I don't know what.
And I really liked Volta's relationship with Rowan, because when they start working together and Rowan's being trained by him and some others, I think he was really good in mentoring Rowan and being like, look, this is horrible, but you have to toughen up and get through it for your own survival. And I actually, maybe this is just me, but I actually thought Rowan and Volta had more romantic chemistry than Rowan and Citra. I was not really sold on that romance of convenience there. But
That was one of the points where I kind of docked at least a half star on it, because I think that was we got to force this male-female relationship now on these two opposing sides, and this has to happen. And you go, but why? He literally just met this girl. Why would he be laying down his life and everything that he thinks and feels for somebody he's, barely know? I mean, maybe there's that love at first sight thing, but don't bank it in every single book that's out there. Otherwise, it doesn't become a thing. It becomes a thing that you look at and go, God, please, just don't.
yeah,
But
well,
yeah,
I think it would have been equally strong if Rowan and Citra were like just friends, like they just admired each other as people, and
yeah.
that would have
I
been
think
enough
there's
for
a
me.
difference. Yeah, and I completely can go along with the idea of you would die for a friend, somebody that you see in the same boat that you're in, that you are struggling with, and you don't want to fight against, but you are. That could have sold it better than the whole love thing that they were trying to. I mean, it wasn't so outright pushing it, but it was enough where you go, I know what you're trying to do. Like, this magic trick is not working.
Yeah, well, and it kind of reminded me of Hunger Games a little bit too, because they fall in love, but yet only one of them is supposed to survive, and
Yep.
it's kind of like, okay, I love the story, I love the concept, but I've seen this particular theme before,
Yeah. And I know that in today's literary world as well as cinema, it's really going to be hard to find an original anything. Anything you see out there, hear out there, or read out there is going to be kind of like, oh, that's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's unfortunately not its own thing, but we have to kind of call out what's bullshit. I mean, come on. Quit trying to force relationships that don't feel natural. It doesn't work for everybody. I know everybody wants a romance, but you can't always have it. And in a book about death, why would you want it?
I think you could have had it with Rowan and Volta, and it would have been good, but
But that's the way that the market rolls, I guess, some days. And who knows? It might not even have been Neal Shusterman's idea. It might have been like, oh, I don't want to
True.
do that. Yeah. So.
and the
who
editor
knows?
might have been like, no, you have to, because this is a young adult novel, and we must have
They want romance.
angsty teen romance.
It could be. I mean, I'm giving Neal an out on this one. I'm gonna say it's not his fault.
Fair enough.
No, all right. Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that really pinged home. I mean, other than the fact that the Scythes take on new names of humanitarians, I think was the one thing that I thought was kind of neat.
Yes. Yeah, I thought that was really cool. And I liked how at the end, the name, I know we said spoilers, but I'm still trying not to spoil anything. I like the name that the protagonist at the end chose, and how it represented the fact that, because she chose Anastasia Romanoff, and it was like, well, yeah, Anastasia Romanoff didn't really do anything, and her family was killed, but maybe if things had been different, she could have been great. So I liked that kind of spoke to the corruption in the system, and maybe this next generation being a change. And I think it also set a nice tone for the second book.
Yeah, it kind of gives you that feel of, when people put their hands together to to lift them up. Be like, yep, come on, you want it?
Yeah.
Put your foot right here. I'm going to lift you and hoist you on over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part was really good, and I do like the way that they're trying to touch on the celebrity faction of Scythes and how that's kind of growing, and I mean, you give enough, I don't know what you want to call it, awe and wonder or fear to something, they kind of feel more powerful, so they become a little bit more, I don't know, snub-nosed. Is that a good way to put it? Where they just kind of look at all the mortals out there like, I could take you out at any time, and they kind of throw out those threats every now and then, or even just in presence.
Well, I think it's really interesting, too, how the Scythes are allowed to kill themselves, and how, so far, all of the Scythes have chosen to do that eventually, like once they hit this certain age. And I think
the self-gleaning stage.
Yeah, like, it speaks really well to the fact, again, that humans aren't meant to live forever, but also that, the human soul can only take so much. Like, you can only kill so many people before you just can't handle life anymore. And
so, and Scythe Faraday, even in the beginning, was saying that he was trying to choose people for the reason that they don't want to kill anybody else, that they don't want to be that kind of person. And then he just looks and goes, yep, you're perfect for this. Because you don't want to get to that point of picking killers like Goddard's group, and then they're running everything. Yeah, so really touching on humanity and science, and I mean, it really just hit a lot of good points to bring up in any kind of conversation without having to specifically go into politics or religion. That's what I liked about it.
Well, and you definitely could take it there if you wanted. Because, the book had tone cults, which were all about resonance and sound and mortality. And apparently they were the conglomeration of all the mortal religions into one thing. And so, I mean, you definitely can take it there, but you don't have to. And I think this book has such strong thematic material that, I mean, we haven't even really gotten much into the plot. And I think that's like a really powerful thing when a book has these bigger overarching issues that you can talk about, as opposed to just like going through a play-by-play of what happened. Yeah, because if people want to know that, they can just read it.
True. Yeah, that's very true. So the theme out there is super awesome. The plot is, I mean, plot's just what any plot is. It's somebody working against something, and now it's two people working against themselves, essentially, to become the one true Scythe, I guess. So that is essentially it, and beyond that, it's just a very entertaining tale that can be spun out into so many different tendrils, I think, that I suggest is to pretty much anybody that's interested in science fiction or death or, anything in that line of sight. I think I would say, yeah, give this one a read. It's not going to be against you. You're not going to be wasting money, I don't think. But, not everything is for everybody, so I will pump the brakes and caution that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So that is our first book, Scythe, and the sequel, Thunderhead. It should be out by the time anybody's listening to this. I'm curious as to where it's going to pick up at, because I know Rowan is on the run, and Faraday is not even supposed to be alive, but he is. Spoiler. Spoiler alert.
I wish they would have explained more about how he faked his death, personally, but...
Yeah, that part that was another sketchy part where it made me go, that's a big plot hole. Like, how do you just say, oh yeah, he died?
Yeah,
we didn't
I would
check.
I would assume like that the Scythedom or the Ambudrones or someone picked up his body.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, who died then?
Well, and they didn't talk about how they disposed of bodies, but I assume like they would have picked up his body to cremate it or bury it or whatever. So, yeah.
That part. There's little tiny.
We think we're done, and it just draws us back in.
Like, you're almost out, but no, you're not. Yeah, the second book should be, if it's as good as the first one, Although that's going to be really hard. That's the only thing I'm cautious about, because now that you have that whole thematic world out there where you're saying, like, look at all these existential points that you can hit on. Now the next one's going to have to be on the story alone, really. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and I think it has a really good potential because you have the old guard of Scythes versus the new, more, shall we say, like brutal killer type Scythes. So
progressives.
yeah. So I think there's a lot of potential for this one to have a much more interesting and engaging plot. You know, the first one really sold me on the concept. It sold me on the
Mhm.
characters. So now I want to see them like just go in and kick ass and destroy the system, basically.
Yeah, tear it all down. Let's see what happens. Well, good. Well, I think it was a good book. So now we're on to our next one. And who are we reviewing the next time?
It is Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and
Jay Kristoff.
Jay
That's
Kristoff.
the other
That's
one.
it.
Yep. It's going to be going. It's going to be a sci-fi one as well, isn't it?
Yes, we're doing back-to-back sci-fi. So
Back to back sci-fi.
we promise we'll get you some fantasy next month.
Don't you worry. We're full of fantasy books and everything out there. And speaking of which, if you want to follow up with us, I suggest you go to www.parallelmagic.wordpress.com. That's going to be our website. We will start branching out from there, but you can pick up on everything that we're doing, who we both are, and have a good old time. This will be out there.
Yes, well, and please come to the website and leave your own comments on this video or this audio. So if you like Scythe or you didn't like it, tell us what you had to think. And if you have any suggestions of books you'd like us to review in the future, feel free to leave those as well.
Absolutely. We look forward to feedback of any kind. And I would remind people on this book, if you've read it, or any book that you've read, if you go out and review it or give it a rating, that means an immense deal to authors and their publishers and editors and everybody that's dealing with that book. So if you've read something, go rate it. They will appreciate it. And other than that, I'm pretty much tapped out. I finished my drink and I'm still good.
Good. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
You're still standing. No.
I'm sitting, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
I could stand. It's fine.
Could you walk a straight line, though?
I probably could. It was only really like a full shot of liquor. I think my height and body mass can handle that for no problem.
Good, good.
All right. Well, other than that, I'll just say cheers to you.
Yeah, cheers. Here's to the next book.
To the next book. Everybody have a good day out there.